Hi everyone, welcome back to Coding for Beginners, where we make web development easy and fun. In today's tutorial, we are going to learn how to create a simple form in Angular. By the end of this video, you will be able to build a basic form, handle user input, and display submitted data. So let's get started. So forms are an essential part of any web application. They allow user to input and submit data. But in Angular, we have two kinds of forms. First, it's called template driven form and other is called reactive forms. So template driven forms are basically simpler forms and they can be used when you are doing a quick development. And reactive forms are more powerful and they are more complex compared to template driven form, and they're used for like a complex scenarios where we want to handle error and those kind of stuff. So in this tutorial we'll focus on template driven forms, which are easier to understand and implement for beginners. Okay, and in the coming videos we'll also focus on the reactive forms, but for now let's get started with the template driven forms. So into our application, we will just go to any of the page, for example, the register page. Okay. So inside the register page, first we need to go and we need to add this page into our app.module.ts. You can do this work on any of the pages you want to do. So I'll create a path, and there if we go to register page, then I want to call my component, which is this one. Now, if I go here and inside my app component.html, I can create one more link here for register component, and I'll say whenever we go to /register, we should see our contact page. Now when we go here and register page, register, and we'll comment out all the other stuff. Okay, so if you go to our main app component here, you can say on when we click on register, our register works, so we can do all of our form stuff on this page. Okay, now let's get started. So inside the register HTML, so here we'll just write basic HTML boilerplate, which is h2, and here we'll have like user registration form, and inside this we will have our form, and the form basically we will remove the action here. Okay, inside this form we need to have first name, last name, email, and all the fields you need from your user. So I will start writing those things. So I'll say div, and here I'll have a label and I'll have an input. So these two fields I need in my form. So in label I'll say for first name, and I'll write the heading of my label, which is first name. Now inside the input we will say type should be of type text because it's a name string, and ID we will say first name. This is just for CSS and stuff, and our input will have a name field, and we will say it should be first name. Okay, and we'll say ng model here, and we want our input field to be required like this. Now I will just copy this div 3 times. Okay, because I need my last name here as well. So I'll say last name, and here I'll say last name as well, last name, and I'll just copy it, put it here last name, and here as well last name. And same ng model we need because we want to connect our TS file and our HTML, so we're using ng model and required here. Okay, and for here we'll have email, and this would have email for email, and type would be of email, and ID should be email as well, and the name, basically the name field here would be email. ng model required, and we'll also use email here. Okay, so we require an email here like that. Okay, now we will have a button to submit our form, and button would be of type submit. Okay, like this, button of type submit, and we want to make our button disabled till our user form is not valid. So we will create a user form in our TS file, and we'll say till that form is not valid. If that form basically if it's not valid, then make this button disabled. Like only if the form is valid, then only we want the user to submit the form data, right? So we'll make it if this field dot valid, if it's false, if it's not valid, then we want to make our submit button disabled. So now in our form here, we will create a user form here, this user form, okay, user form, and this user form we will make it equal to ng form. So basically this creates a template reference of user form here and bind it to our ng form, okay? And ng form is basically this whole form we have created here using all these references. And whenever here we will say ng submit method we will use, and whenever this ng submit method is called, we want to call our on submit method, which we will create in our template file, and it will have the whole user form in it, this user form. Okay, now we need to create this on submit inside our TS file. So the input fields you see here, this input fields uses ng model to create a two-way data binding for our input field, and required just make sure that we have validations and stuff. And as I explained what disable does already. So now we can go to our TS file, and inside the TS file we can write all these properties. So first, our on submit method, whenever user presses the button, this button, right, it will basically submit our user form using this on submit button. So we need to make sure that our method accepts a parameter of form, which is type any for now. Inside this we can print our console log, and there we can say that our form data, basically that should be equal to form, what we are getting for our HTML, from our HTML form dot value. So now from here we should have access to the values in the form field. So basically this form dot value have access to all of the form field which we have created here, all of them. Okay, now if we go to our register component here, okay, and we write here something Abhi and last name saying and some email, okay, you can see the submit button is not active yet, it's disabled. Okay, so if we try to write something like that, now you see it became active. So if we go to inspect, and inside our console, if we submit here, you can see that we have got the form data, which is our email, first name, last name. You can see all of the fields, and then we can submit it to backend and continue our processing, what we need to do. So now let's modify our component. So now we'll go back to our component, and in the TS file we will modify this so that we can store the submitted data, for example our name, email and last name, first name, last name and email, and we can display it to the user here, right, not just to see in the console.logs. So we'll go here and we will say inside on submit we will create a object, and inside that object first we will create a value called submit. We'll create a value called is submitted, and we'll say it as false in the beginning because we don't want the user to submit an empty form, so we'll make it false in the beginning. Okay, and we'll create a user data object basically, and this would be equals to our form, whatever we are getting. So user data, basically this will have a first name, so this is the data basically which we get from the form, right? So we are going to store all our form data equals to this, and then we can display it to the user. So we can say every time the user clicks on submit, like user has filled up his field, button is active and he's clicking on submit, we want to make this property as true, like which means the form has been submitted. After that we will say user data dot first name, and we want to make it equals to our form dot value dot first name, right? So we are giving all the fields whatever user have written in the form equals to, we are storing it our TS file. So like this we will do for our user data dot last name and email, and we'll store the values from form inside these things. Now this object user data has all the value of our forms, okay, and every time basically user has clicked on submit, we have stored the data in this field inside this object. Then we can make sure to reset our form. So we'll say form dot reset. So we can call this method, and this method is provided from form. So it's not a method we create. Okay, so form.reset, as we want the user to have the new value every time. Now we can go into our HTML file and we can display all this data to the user. So inside this, later on, for example, we want to display the data, we can say div, and here we'll say ngIf. So we want to only display the data when the form is submitted. So we'll say if is submitted, then only show the data. So inside this we can just basically show data like this. H3 submitted data, we have p tags where we are getting user data from here, this user data, and as we have access to all the fields inside the from here, so we can just put it, right? So user data dot first name, last name, and email. Now if you go to our register component and we can write our value like this, okay, and if I submit the data, see, you can see all the data printed here, and also you can see that our form fields have resetted the data, so have become as empty string, so user can go and write new data, right? So if we go back to our forms, you can see our form has validation attribute, like you cannot just write any email or something like that, or you cannot just, if you decide to leave this field empty. So if you notice in our form, if we miss any of the field, we cannot submit the data. So our form does have validation, which helps us to submit or not submit the data, but it would be better if we can provide feedback to the user directly. So for that, what we can do is we can update our form template. So inside here, we'll go and update this name, okay, this field, and paste some styling, which I'm giving here. So to enhance user experience, so we'll just add some basic styling here like this, and just this will make our form field look good, okay? So now we will make our form more user friendly, and we will add some validations which can help user to fill the form correctly. So we will go here and write here a div, and inside that, this div, we will say that we want user to see this first name is required. So when you want to show them, for example, if a user goes here, he clicks here and then he clicks outside and doesn't fill this field, then we want to tell the user that first name is required, last name is required, or email is required accordingly. So we want to show this on some specific condition. So we will say, so we will use ngIf to do that, and we will say inside ngIf that whenever our user form dot controls, and inside controls we want to access our first name, which is this first name, okay, dot first name, and if this is invalid, okay, so dot invalid like this. And with this we want to add one more condition, and there we will say if user form dot controls, and inside that controls we want to again write our this first name, okay, and we will use touched property. So this touched basically become true or false if the user goes and touches this and doesn't do anything like this. Say it came here, first name is required, and if we write something, then it would go away, right? So we want to just do this everywhere in our field, and we can give it some styling, right? Like we can say style color should be equals to red, okay. Now we can just copy this same field in all of our input fields. So we just need to change our controls property, which is here it should be last name, and later on it should be email. So we'll write last name here, and here we will write email, and we'll say email is required here. So now if we go to our local host, you can see here it says first name is required, right? And if we click here, this would also say last name is required in email. And once we start writing our fields here, you will see all of them are gone. But if we start clearing it, then the field comes again. So we have to make sure that we write all the fields, and then only our submit button would be active. Otherwise it would not be active. And now if we submit it, then only we'll be able to see the data, and this again becomes disabled, and all of our field become active again to write our new data like this, okay. So great job, you just created a simple form in Angular with basic validation and also data handling as well. Obviously, you can add more fields into your form depending if you want a password and other fields, and you can create those validations for those fields. The validations can be advanced and it can be more complex how you want it. And in the coming videos, we'll also discuss reactive forms where we will be using these complex scenarios. So thank you for watching. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more tutorials on Angular. I will see you guys in the next video.